About 8 years ago, I was in a private church university, BYU, Idaho, in East Idaho, in Rexburg, and one of my role models at the time I was about like 21 or 22, and I think I had a calling as being one of the FHE coordinators, and my social life was okay, not the best, but it was all right. But one of my role models was a young father, and the second counselor in my ward. His name was Ian Haver, and he was about to go to grad school for English, and we hit it off with a lot of similar tastes in books and music. And I was getting really into the stories I was writing at the time, and really discovering how well I could write, and getting really excited about my potential future as an author. And he was also working on stuff, and so sometimes we'd have FHE activities at his house, and we would just hit it off talking about things. And eventually, he recommended me this book, A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Guin. After I got a little bit too excited and explained to him an outline for a dark fairy tale like fantasy that I was working on, and it reminded him of the works of Ursula Guin, because he was more wider read than me at that time. And boy, that was probably the best book recommendation that anyone's ever given me, that really opened my eyes to another aspect of classic fantasy I wasn't yet totally familiar with, that was especially spoke to me for having the same sort of soul and vibes of where I'm from, like the Northwest United States sort of feel, of sort of a coastal, sort of mystical magic feel, and a sort of melancholy that's connected to the world of Earthsea and the magic of that world, and how the magic sort of operates, that is very more felt than understood, but also sort of understood to be something along the lines of the darkness of shadowy dimensions, other dimensions, and there's some connection to nature, and there's symbolism with your animal self, and shape shifting, and also there's powerful magic that you can't really explain. You kind of just have to read to understand what it means, because you'll never fully understand it with your mind. You'll understand it with your heart. And so, A Wizard of Earthsea is a story about identity and power, and essentially the loneliness of what it means to confront aspects of yourself, and truly develop, and where the pursuit of knowledge will actually take you. That is universally relatable to any young person, or not any person of any age, but especially young people who are really looking for those things: power, knowledge, identity, the link between those things. I cannot explain how melancholy, like how uniquely beautiful this book is in terms of setting, which runs perfectly in harmony with the tone, with the word choice, with the solemn, simplistic, yet beautifully impactful prose and writing style that is so clear. It almost feels as though her ability with the English language has unlocked something in you, as if that she's playing a subconscious trick on you, that I could compare to Tolkien in a way, but in some ways almost feels more powerful. So bold in its overall visual imagination and realization of this world, feels very believable, very real, and it's genuinely sad and moving throughout. And there's this background theme of abandonment. So Jed is a young, random, eccentric kid who's more or less spiritually rejected by his parents growing up, because he is interested in basically what is seen as superstitious, occult, dark magic, but is not understood in the small, nothing peasant hamlet that where he's from, in which that is sort of a representation for a given student's understanding of a given set of higher laws that manifest in the universe, and can manifest through things like understanding of art or spirituality, or some sort of aptitude with like an area of talent that really makes them process the world and see the world differently. No doubt a lot of autistic kids could relate to this character a lot of gifted kids who try to find meaning through books, or attachments to other things that don't necessarily have the same understanding, because to simpleton minds, like a lot of people's parents that they're born with, they're not necessarily understood, or or having a lot of faith in them projected upon them to find their own identities by their parents, and so they sometimes don't develop the best social skills. And Jed really fits this category in the sense that he does sort of strike you as someone who is sort of blindsided by ambition that is very typical of just about any boy that has ever lived before. And there's something deeply, profoundly nostalgic and universally relatable and sad about that to anyone who reads this book. Young women too, but more often than not, boys. This is really a story about the birth of a superhero in a way by first confronting his own demons, making mistakes, learning from them, and going on this long odyssey where fate having to do with knowledge sort of calls to him, and in a way where he cannot really resist it. It's almost like a thing of deep destiny and identity. And somehow that perfectly complements the theme of loneliness that I haven't really seen driven home so hard and so tragically since I read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, an absolute other classic masterpiece. I would say that I related to this character more than I was comfortable with, um, especially the relationship with the character and his biological father in the beginning of the story, just to be totally honest. And yet, and at the same time, there was some genuine, unexpected, pulpy chills and scares, and like what's going to happen next sort of thriller pace. At one time, the book is intentionally slow and boring with some of the prose, but yet, and feels, although it's only less than 200 pages long, um, it's such a work of genius in its overall construction and just the way it's written and the pacing, because it feels like it's 200 years long. It feels like you're progressing at a snail's pace through this character's life, and every different instance he finds himself with his hellish obsession with knowledge and growth at the expense of developing other aspects of humanity. Well, he learns the hardest lesson and pays the hardest price in that pursuit. And that is just a very satisfying cautionary tale in a big way, but by the end of it, it doesn't necessarily end badly. And so it's inspiring rather than being a sort of curse. You can sort of process relatable pursuits of identity and empowerment and the sorts of things that waste our youth. Often, average mortal human can relate to that a lot. In a way that will propel you forward in life and help you face your fears. So I would say that this book is a work of absolute perfection, a mastery of language, original in tone, and with an original world that feels very universally relatable, deeply tragic, but made the more beautiful, therefore, but not to the point of abusing the medium of fiction by going so far as to making things downright cruel for the protagonists, but by the end having an underlying message of hope and embracing who you are. And I think that's what the story's really about. Even if that road that few people in life genuinely take, which is what the wizard Jed eventually takes, who is the wizard of Earthsea, the quintessential wizard here. Storybooks for wizards and wizards in training, if you know what I mean. Like, that path is a lonely path, but it's sometimes destiny calls, and it's a path that you need to take. I related to this story on a spiritual level that transcends words. I'm good with words sometimes, not so much presentation, but damn, did my friend Ian know how to recommend a good book to me, and so I'm forever grateful for that. This is an absolute fantasy classic. I compare it to something along the lines of Lord of the Rings and a Song of Ice and Fire series, and The Name of the Wind by Pat Rothfuss, and The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. This has got to be in my top 20 favorite books of all time. It is a pretty slow read, but like in a way that's necessary. I believe it came out in its first was published in 1968, and so Ursula Guin passed away not too long ago, but she wrote several other books in this world, and she also wrote other classics like The Left Hand of Darkness, which I've yet to read. This is the only book I've read by her so far. I just haven't made time in my life with all my other hobbies and ambitions, taking my time in different directions to read Tombs of Antoine in the Earthsea series or other books by her, but I definitely will try to get around to that before I'm dead. So I highly recommend Wizard of Earthsea. If you're a fantasy fan, it is an essential read. I give it 10 out of 10. You may not have the same sort of deep, nostalgic, emotional connection of soul that I felt I had when I read it the first time. But I guarantee you will remember this story if you don't enjoy it from moment to moment as I did. Thanks for watching.